Hey! In this video we're going to talk about the Swedish language. I just want to start this video by telling that I'm not making this from an outsider perspective, rather I'm still inside this process. I'm still learning Swedish, but I think I have some points to share, how my contribution to make to this topic, and if you're learning Swedish or if you're looking for some inspiration, then welcome to my video. I've been learning Swedish since July 2023. I'm a self-learner. I've been to Sweden only twice, but both times I spent quite a bit of time there in different regions of Sweden, not only in Stockholm. I'm quite experienced with this language, not only from the linguistic perspective. I've also done a significant amount of work with Norwegian and Danish. I'm also learning Finnish. I know this is not the most relevant thing, but I'm just giving you my Nordic credentials. I'm fluent in German. I'm learning Dutch, so I have this whole Germanic background behind me while learning Swedish. And in this video I want to talk about some challenges, some tips, and also Swedish from different perspectives, namely Swedish for German speakers, Swedish for English speakers. First I want to start by telling why I'm learning Swedish, because I think this is the most hilarious part, and when people ask me this question, I almost feel like I'm joking, but no. I want to learn Swedish because I was just obsessed with IKEA and like all the product names. I was like, I have to learn this language. And after graduating high school, I had a bit of free time. So I was like, why not? It's not supposed to be that difficult. It's like a Germanic language. I know German. And if you're wondering, yes, I've been to IKEA in Sweden, but I don't want to talk about that in this video or ever again. The reason why I share why I'm learning this language is because just let you guys know that you can also learn a language for a stupid reason. And as someone who's living in Italy, I know that Swedish is not a particularly relevant language, but you know, languages just don't appear in your life and you have to just make them happen. For example, I do a lot of stuff in Swedish since it's also a language I'm currently learning. I like producing stuff in Swedish or consuming stuff in Swedish. And you can also never ignore the possible opportunities this language is going to bring into your life. Like, Swedish is the only reason why I'm learning Finnish, and this is a whole new perspective. It's the reason why I got to know the Nordic countries and languages, maybe. I read my first Norwegian book before I read my first Swedish book. I've been to Denmark, I've been to different places of Sweden, I've been to Helsinki this summer. I haven't been to Norway. Maybe one day I'm posting a Swedish vlog from Oslo. Or maybe I pick up some Norwegian and post it in Norwegian instead. I don't know, let me know in the comments. Now I'm going to make you a quick time lapse of my Swedish learning process from the first day till today. Well, before starting Swedish, I was the proud German speaker who was thinking all the odds were in favor of me, because that was kind of the case in Dutch. I was thinking it was going to be exactly the same thing in Swedish, and Swedish was going to be easier than Dutch. I first started with this playlist on YouTube. This is going to give you like a quick background of the Swedish language, and it's actually useful. But the thing is, I watched this in 2 days because I was super restless and I thought like I could like pick up the entire language quickly. At the end I was frustrated, I was literally crying. So you don't have to go through this in 2 days, maybe use it in the background, use it with another material. When you're learning a niche language like Swedish, being niche comes with its own challenges. You don't really have the freedom or flexibility to choose among resources. I even tried Duolingo, and the last time I downloaded that app, I was probably a child trying to learn French, and then never again in this huge career of learning languages. I tried Duolingo for Swedish, and after a few hours I was like, I'm not stupid. Like, I speak German, I speak English. I know I have a greater potential than this. So I stopped doing it. The Swedish language wasn't just what I expected, so I took a break. I used this post to kind of like strengthen everything I learned. And after my break, I went back to YouTube, because YouTube is like a huge school. You can learn anything you want. And I started looking out for Swedish channels. I'm going to leave some of them for you on the screen so you can kind of explore and pick what you like, what you don't like, what works for you and everything. And I kind of started to build something more meaningful. And also I was looking for textbooks. I'm not the biggest fan of textbooks, but as I said, when it comes to Swedish, you kind of have to use everything you can find. After a long research, I decided for Rivstart. I started using Rivstart A1, A2. Last year I also used B1, B2. And the best thing with this book is that you can probably find it online. And also they have their exercises and audio files online on a website. And they also have like word lists and verb lists in English and in German. I would say if you're a self-learner, you don't have a teacher, you necessarily don't have friends, I would go with this, because Swedish is a language that you have to listen, so you can't do without the audio files, you can't do with just reading textbooks. So if you're a self-learner, this would be my go-to. I did A1, A2 book. I was also doing B1, B2 book, but I stopped doing it because it wasn't challenging me enough. I'm not saying I know everything inside that book, but still, like while I was studying with it, I didn't feel like I was being challenged. I wasn't necessarily like learning a lot of stuff. Right now I'm just more freestyling, you know. After a few months, I wanted to actually like choose a more practical approach of learning Swedish, so I switched to podcasts. And there are a few podcasts that I was listening as a beginner. If you go to like first episodes, they are going to like make easier topics and they are going to speak slower. So you can use podcasts for shadowing, like you repeat what they say, or you can use them for vocabulary. I would say pick one and stick to it, like commit to it and listen to each episode. Because as a beginner, there's a stage where you want to have stability over exposure. So I would tell you pick one that sounds like a fit for you and go with it. In November of the same year, I went to Sweden for the first time and it was my first solo trip. I spent there almost like a week. And I can't say I was that afraid because like if I went to China today, I can't talk to locals. I know it for a fact. But if I went to Portugal, it would probably like take me a few conversations of failing and then trying again and then making up phrases in my head from Spanish, from Italian, I don't know. So when I went to Sweden, I was kind of confident and I was like, I'm going to talk to people in Swedish because, you know, no one cares. I always approach people in Swedish and thankfully, everyone was willing to help me. I think Swedes are super encouraging. They always ask me if I want to speak in English or in Swedish. They were always like slowly explaining me stuff. And I know a lot of you maybe have the opposite of this experience. I don't know, it's just the type of people I encountered. So in Sweden, I had a really easy time practicing Swedish. And also having the language in your daily life and hearing it, reading it around is the best contribution you can make, and we don't always have the opportunity. And I had this opportunity for the first time with Swedish. Like I never experienced this with French, with German, I don't know. But with Swedish and Finnish, I actually had the chance to go to those countries and observe the language, live the language itself. After coming back from Sweden, one thing has changed. I was super motivated to keep up my Swedish learning journey because my brain kind of passively picked up some stuff, some words, the pronunciation, because it's a huge point. I'm going to come back to that. So after that, for months, I just kept doing the same things, you know, like Rivstart and podcasts. It was just like a balance of two. Every now and then, you may want to pick up some grammar, and if you like to deepen some grammar topics that you encounter in a book, that you encounter in a podcast, that you simply want to learn, I would recommend that you look for SFI, Svenska för invandrare. This is basically Swedish courses for immigrants. These are going to be the most traditional you can get, okay? Like if you want the real study stuff, if you want explanations, if you want the classes on YouTube, there are plenty of them. So if you're looking for a specific topic and learning materials, just add SFA to your research. After months of learning Swedish, I can't really say I was proud of myself. Like after a year and a half, I wasn't really happy with how far I came. Around last year, I decided that I had to shift something, so I started like consuming more real-life content in Swedish without necessarily having the learning purpose. Like since around a year, I'm following Slow Swedish with Katrin. She has podcasts for beginners. Like if you're just starting out, she has her podcast for free on every platform, and she's going through the basics of Swedish language. I personally don't listen to this one because I was kind of late to this. But if your Swedish level is something like me, or if you are just starting to understand things and if you want to make listening your primary learning approach, she also has a paid podcast on Patreon. Did we say Patreon? Patreon. And she has like, she first teaches vocabulary and expressions on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Then later in the week you have the same episode in slow Swedish, in easy Swedish and in normal Swedish. So if you ask me how I'm studying Swedish today, that's the answer, that's my go-to resource. Because I think language learning is also kind of about like testing your limits and kind of pushing those limits because you can't always stay where you're comfortable at. Now I'm going to talk about some of the things I found difficult with the Swedish language and the solutions I came up with. For me, the biggest point of difficulty with Swedish was the pronunciation, because why are we talking like that? And I think this is remarkable even to people who don't speak Swedish, because I get comments that say like I sound like the girl from Scam, even though Scam is Norwegian. I understand where you're coming from, because alltså svenska och norska, jag skulle inte säga danska också, men alltså svenska och norska har den här sjungande melodin. Man måste prata så här, alltså som man sjunger kanske. Jag vet inte. Men alltså man måste ha den här svenska rösten kanske. How I fix my pronunciation issues, partially because I don't think I have the perfect Swedish pronunciation. I started watching a lot of stuff in Swedish, literally binge watching everything, and if this is going to give someone inspiration, I don't care about being cringe. I watched Love is Blind Sweden. I watched the first season with German subtitles, the second season I could already watch with Swedish subtitles, and now I can watch anything with Swedish subtitles. And the thing with Swedes is that they make a lot of TV. They make a lot of reality shows, they make a lot of dating stuff. When you watch that kind of things, you expose yourself to a lot of people, a lot of ways of pronunciation, and a lot of real life stuff. If you spend some time watching TV shows in Swedish, I think you will get the pronunciation. And something else that can help is maybe practicing the Swedish sounds, like the vowels, the short vowels, the long vowels, because I normally never do like such exercise in languages I'm learning because pronunciation is always so natural to me. But with Swedish, you may need some practice. And also one thing I want to remind to learners is that I think Swedish pronunciation is also super flexible. Like there's no standard Swedish. Like if you're learning German, you probably don't go and learn German from Bayern, I imagine, if you're not living there. But with Swedish is, I think like even Swedes are kind of like arguing about this. Like Stockholm Swedish, I don't know how standard that is. Like if you're a Swede watching this video, please make your own contribution in the comments because that would help also me. I don't think you have to aim for the perfect Stockholm Swedish because like the biggest, how to say that, like märkmal of the Stockholm Swedish is the E sound that they have. And I know it's difficult, I know I'm not perfect with it. Like there's this E sound that we are all familiar with. Then in Russian and Turkish there's this U sound that you make from the front of your mouth that some of us struggle with, but I was born with that. And then in Swedish there's this sound that comes from way back. So I kind of picked up the sound from listening to Swedish a lot, but also from practicing syllables. Like I was constantly saying stuff like bil, min, sin. Like you have to practice that, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't come so naturally to me. Like Swedish has a ton of different pronunciations. People speak in different ways in different regions. Like literally some of them are more like Danish, some of them are more like Norwegian, like the intonations, the way that they speak, everything is so different. Or some words are pronounced differently, like for example I say kanske, but I've heard people say kanske. The second point I found difficult in the Swedish language is the articles. Because coming from German, I was kind of confused at the beginning. Like, let's take an example. We say bil for the car, but if I want to say the car, we make it bilen. And I don't understand why the goes to the end, because 2 years ago I would say that this looks like a plural word, but no, this just means the car. But if I want to say a car, I have to say en bil. And if I want to say the red car, I'm saying den röda bilen. Like, why do I have two articles all of a sudden at the end of the word and at the beginning? And also Swedes have this weird way of demonstrating things, like you can say den här bilen, like the here car, if you want to say this car. And it's not always to demonstrate things, you can also say den här veckan, this week, this here week. And to me it was kind of strange because I never learned this. I first heard it from a friend and I was like, is this how I'm supposed to say? But now I just think it's so cute, like den här, you can also say den där. It's just so funny. Also plurals in Swedish is a huge challenge for learners because like they have several possible endings but they don't always follow the endings. There are some patterns that you could catch, like if a word ends in A, then it's probably going to take or, like kvinna, kvinnor, vecka, veckor, karta, kartor. But there are different endings, some words just change entirely, some of them don't change. So this is a question of practice, and it's also something that you pick up from the beginning. Like if you're learning a word, just learn it properly if it's going to take en or et, and which plural it's getting. And ultimately there have been a few things that felt really strange for me. For example, how informal the Swedish language is. Because you're going to call everyone du, like literally your professor, the parents of your friend, probably any stranger on the street, you're going to call them du. So I don't feel really comfortable calling everyone du. But also I think this takes away a lot of pressure when you're speaking, because even though you're speaking to someone on the street, they are a du. Like, I don't know, it just makes talking to people a bit easier, maybe? And to my fellow proud German speakers, I want to tell something. Because if you take a spectrum with German and English on different ends, Dutch would be somewhere here, but If we are thinking about Swedish, it's closer to the English end. Times you have to drop your German logic and think more like English. German is going to help you with vocabulary because you're going to like recognize things without learning them. And vocabulary learning is going to be twice easier for you maybe. But when you are making sentences, drop the German logic. Not fully because, for example, in German you say heute mache ich, like you bring the verb right after heute. In Swedish it's the same. Finally, to wrap up some learners tips, I want to say like prioritize understanding and speaking Swedish without losing yourself in grammar. Because you know what? If you say ett bil instead of en bil, no one is going to think that you're talking about airplanes. And if you just overly dramatize grammar topics and the little details here and there, it will be so difficult for you to reach fluency. Lastly, I want to touch on something that I especially see on social media. A lot of people who live in Sweden struggle to make friends with Swedish people, or learners who are struggling to practice Swedish with Swedish people. I want to share my 2 cents on this. Like, I haven't lived in Sweden, but I've known a lot of Swedes, and I've been close to a lot of Swedes. So I kind of understand where your struggles are coming from. And I don't like generalizing, like saying those people are like this. Like, I don't reflect the average Turkish person. So I think it's rather a question of finding people with shared interests. So when it comes to Swedes, if you just go to those people who are still hanging out with their high school friends, just try to make friends with them. This is maybe going to be difficult, but this is going to be difficult in any country, not only in Sweden, not only in Scandinavia. I know people who live abroad but only talk to people from their country. This could never be me. I barely talk to people from my country, for example. So I would tell you to find people who are at least learning languages. To average Swede, maybe that's not super interesting. To average Russian, that could be interesting because they think their language is difficult and they are more proud of their language probably. So yeah, this can be this thing with Scandinavia, but you also shouldn't have those mental walls that make you avoid communication, because Sweden, personally, was one of the countries where I was the most comfortable in terms of communication, like small talk, making friends, talking to strangers. But I'm not a social butterfly myself, you know? That was all I want to share when it comes to Swedish language. I do a lot of stuff in Swedish because it's a language I'm currently learning, so you could watch my vlogs and maybe follow me on Instagram because I share more daily life content there. So hopefully this gave you some ideas, and see you next week with a new video. Hej då!